Okay, Magic Makers. Today, I am talking about GLPs, and I don't even have to explain that anymore. I feel like all of us know what the heck it is, but I also think we know what it is, but we're not quite sure what it is. Some of us feel like you whisper about it. Some of you feel like you can talk about it out loud. And so I hate when we have this controversy. And so I brought in, I got to bring in experts who can really sort through the bullshit and sort through the true story about these different medications. So I am joined here today by Dr. Megan Garcia Webb, and she is triple board certified in internal medicine and obesity medicine. So she runs a concierge practice here in Boston, right? I love having a
Yeah.
fellow Bostonian on the show. And so we're here to break down all about Ozempic, peptides, all the things, midlife, and all the tricks that stop working. So Megan, Dr. Megan, please welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I love when I find people who, one, like walk the same line that I do, who can really educate my audience because we're all in social media land. And, you see the influencers, I'm using air quotes for those of you guys listening, who can really, get you thinking in the complete opposite direction of what's actually happening.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot out there, and that's why I love doing what I do because I love to just tell people the truth, what's helpful for them, and so they can filter out all the things that aren't helpful for their health.
Right. So let's just get right into the heat of it. Like, why do you think there's such shame and judgment when people decide to go on these GLP, Ozempic, Wegovy medications?
I think there's this idea that somebody's like cheating or
Mm,
doing it the wrong way, and that there's somehow a right way to be healthy. And it's all about how we kind of impose these ideas of, our own internal ideas of like how we think things should be done on other
right.
people, right? And it's just a great example of how that is done at a much larger scale. And yeah, I think it's this real idea of there's a right way to do things, and if you take medication, then you're doing it wrong.
And it's interesting because I feel like over the, decades, there have been several medications that have been proposed for weight loss, and that, from what my understanding, the Ozempic category of drugs have been around for almost 20 years. And it just has been, I'm going to call it popularized in the last several years. And so, if it was any other medication that people were taking, it wouldn't be as vilified.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they have been around definitely for over 10 years, and it's the GLP-1 receptor agonist we've been using for diabetes. But it really was and so the first one we had was liraglutide, which worked pretty well. Okay, people could lose maybe 10 to 12% of their total body weight, but it really wasn't that far away from the weight loss medications, the oral weight loss medications that we have. We've had some of them since the 1950s. So it wasn't a huge break from that. And it was really when semaglutide came along and was FDA approved for weight, that there was this whole expansion of how we could use this. And it really took the weight loss potential to a much bigger place, about 15% total
Mm,
average body weight loss. Um, which is, that's quite a difference from where we had started. The oral medications, if they work, people
right.
can maybe like 5% of their total body weight. So, and then just on top of that, we had tirzepatide approved, which is also known as Zepbound or Mounjaro, and that is the closest we've ever been able to get to achieving, what bariatrics can achieve
Mm,
in terms of getting people to a 20% average body weight loss. So it is, it's a really, from a medical standpoint, it's a substantial advance, and it's a real tool we have now to help people that we didn't have anything anywhere near close to that before.
right. And so as you talk about the GLP, what exactly does GLP do in the body?
That is a great question. So the reason that this medication is so effective is that because so GLP on its own only lasts for a couple minutes, but what these medications do is they kind of activate the same receptor
Mm,
as what GLP does. And what that does is it affects our body in a couple different ways. Number one, it helps slow the movement of food through the stomach so that you feel fuller for longer and you're better able to appreciate those symptoms of fullness.
mm,
It also really seems to impact in our brain where we have our energy regulation. So that balance of fat storage and fat burning tends to get changed so that it's easy for people to lose an additional amount of weight. And then for some people, it has this additional benefit where it really helps the reward circuitry in the brain so that food is just no longer quite as entertaining. And so that's when you hear people talk about, oh, this food noise, I don't have it anymore. Or if I do have it, it's much better. That's what that is helping for a lot of people as well.
yeah, it's you said, you talked about the GLP. So there's two thoughts I had here. And one is some people out in the social media world are saying that if you take these medications, they're synthetic and they are going to disrupt your natural GLP cycle. And, is that, you know, on one hand, I'm like, okay, you can see that. But on the other hand, is it more propaganda or is that actually what may or may not be happening?
Well, I think it's a good question. I don't really know what people mean when they say like disrupt your natural GLP cycle. It's really boosting what you
Hmm,
already have.
right.
And so certainly, we know that when people stop taking the medication, those effects go away. Just like if you stop taking a statin or you stop taking a blood pressure medication, like those effects are going to go away too. So like any medication, it stops working when you stop using it. But uh, I wouldn't, that's not something that I worry about for people.
Gotcha, gotcha. And so as I'm taking these medications, and I know this is one of your kind of big rally cries is that it's also about the habits that you have around. You've been in the obesity space far longer than these medications have been able to be subscribed. So for you, it's always been about how do I, help my clients who do come to you and they're like, girl, I've tried everything. Like,
Right.
I've been banging my head up against this wall for, they don't even know how long they've been banging up this head up against the wall. So when they get to that point, are there ways for you to naturally boost your GLP? Because you see it all over the place. Natural GLP, and the skeptic in me is like, if it wasn't a popularized pharmaceutical drug, what would your shtick be?
Yeah, I think, well, I have to quote you on the kind of the boring basics. And I think, it's these things that we hear of over and over, and it's like you just don't hear them anymore. It's like
Mm,
alarm fatigue, but they really work.
they do.
And nobody wants to hear it because like it's boring, right? But it's if I had to try to induce what the GLP-1s do without the use of that medication, I would say, you want to focus on eating foods that are going to keep you full for longer. And so that means your food should always have some component of fat, fiber, or protein, or all of the above,
Mm,
because that's what's going to tell your body that you're full for the longest amount of time. And I would really, get rid of the processed foods as much as possible because that's what really, these foods are designed to be addictive, right? Like there are lots of very smart people in these companies who are trying to make them as palatable and delicious as possible. So they are literally engineered to be consumed to be as appealing as
mm,
possible. And so, whether you feel like that's evil or not is kind of up for debate, but they really are intended to be as appealing to our kind of deepest human desires, right? And so I would just try to eliminate those as much as possible. I don't think you could never have a piece of candy again, right? But really sticking to whole foods, less processed foods, ingredients that you can visualize what they are. I think that's really important, especially if people want to reduce the food noise. A lot of that has to do with, what is causing the food noise to begin with. Like usually it's not an apple that's causing the food noise, right?
Right.
And then the other thing is just listening to your body. Nobody knows when they're hungry and when they're full.
No.
And and that's a totally free resource that you can do at any time. But again, it takes attention and it takes time really to kind of stop and think and actually ask yourself, am I hungry or is this just my brain because I saw something that looked appealing, but I actually just had lunch, so I'm not really hungry. So I think all of that, all of those are resources that we have available now and certainly, would be helpful for anybody, whether they're on a medication or not.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember my old coach when I first started this whole journey. She was like, the difference between a hungry and being hungry and a craving is that if you're hungry, you'll eat broccoli. If you're craving, you're not going to eat that broccoli.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's definitely like I am also not the food police. Like I always tell
Right.
my patients like I want people to be able to have, a life that includes pizza if they want it, cupcakes if they want. Like there's no like food can't make you a good or a bad person. We just want to figure out like where do you want that in your life? And if it's causing you to have a lot of food noise, you may want to have less of it.
Right. And so, as you kind of like, as you talked about, you're trying to instill the boring basics with people. Who do you think is a good candidate for these medications? Because like right now, because you and I are now talking about it, and also because of what you do, there's going to be a flood in our social media feed of all these varying places that I can get it. I'm going to
Mhm.
turn on my TV
Right.
later today, and there's going to be 500 commercials talking about it. Who makes a good candidate for these medications?
Well, there actually is some pretty strict criteria in terms of who would benefit from that. And we start with BMI, and I know sometimes that's a little controversial and it's
Mm,
certainly not the best, the be all end all, but it is helpful in terms of, having some sort of objective measurement for people. So people with at least a BMI of 27 to just under 30 who also have a weight-related comorbidity or anybody with a BMI of 30 or above. Um, those are just the bare bones requirements, essentially, to start a medication. And then I think there are a couple different categories of people that really benefit. I think sometimes there are the people that they've really optimized everything.
mhm.
They really like how they eat, they really like how they exercise, and for whatever reason, maybe they're on medications that are not helping their weight, or maybe they have other medical issues that are going on, but for whatever reason, they really can't get their BMI down to a healthier range. And I think those are always in my experience, like the people who are happiest with the medication because they've really
Yeah.
optimized it. They've really done everything that they can do, and they're like, I've kind of reached the end of what I can do, right? So I think those people are always really good candidates. And then I think there is a class of people that they've just tried things so many
Mm,
times and they're so kind of mentally beaten up by this kind of
yes.
yo-yo cycle. And I think for those people, I think they're probably like the most likely to be criticized by others, but really can benefit so much from like they just don't have the energy to do one more thing that they're not sure
Right.
if it's going to work. And every time something doesn't work, it just kind of further
Mm,
confirms the fact that this is never going to be fixed for them, right? So I think for those people, starting the medication first can be extremely helpful because it does help them with momentum. And then they're like, wow, I've lost,
yeah.
20 pounds. I can see the scale moving in a way that it has never moved before. I can kind of trust this medication to do its job, and then I can, invest my time and energy in the other things that I really like. I can go to the gym now and I feel so different about it.
You know,
So,
I think you nailed the head because a lot of the women that I come to are at their last straw, right? They're just like, And if you look at their food log, you look at their lifestyle, they're not out there, eating ice cream every day, and they're not just laying on the couch. They're putting in the work.
Mhm.
Yet, there's a toggle that just isn't, no matter what they pull, is not giving them the weight loss that they're looking for. And it's like I feel like those people are the vilified ones because, in their social circles, Sharon, she's super healthy. I can't believe she's gonna do that.
Right, right. Yeah.
And it's like Sharon's like, girl, like I am out here like killing myself.
Right.
And the mental beat up that you do for yourself that like, oh my God, like I can't eat yet another protein bar. I can't, do another whatever on the Stairmaster. You're just like you're so kind of in your head of like your uncle.
Right, right. You're doing all that you can and you really don't want to get diabetes, right?
Right.
And this is a great tool to help with that. So yeah, I think it is it's just a real mechanism for people that we didn't have before that is so helpful.
And the thing I want to shift to is that I focus primarily with women in midlife. And I see that this, I'm personally looking at these medications as a tool for them, that they are the person I just described. Sharon, she goes to the gym, she eats right, she eats healthy, she's doing all the things.
Yeah.
Yet menopause came and just, took her out of the game.
Hmm.
And, she wakes up and she's like, am I gaining 10 pounds a year? Which is what happened to me. And you're like, I'm doing all the right things. And the best thing your doctor could be like, let's wait and see. And you're just like, that is not the answer I
Right.
came here for. I waited 6 months for this appointment for you to tell me to wait and see. I've been waiting 6 months.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think those women are good candidates for this. However, many women will tell, because of all of the noise that we hear out there, like, well, I'm going to lose muscle and I'm going to get gastroparesis and I think my thyroid's going to explode. You know, how do we kind of bust those myths for people like that?
Yeah, those are such great questions. So I think number one, when people are really worried about these side effects like gastroparesis, small bowel obstruction, like, yeah, those are life-threatening conditions in some cases. Um, and so I think that just underscores the need for people to be monitored, right?
Mm,
You really need to be careful that you're getting the FDA approved version. That's what I always tell people. And that you have somebody that you trust that is not just, on the other end of a messaging app that you're
yeah.
not quite sure if it is a human, but somehow
Hmm.
like you got this prescription. Like these are not over-the-counter medications. You do need to be monitored. They are serious. And so those things like you should be able to catch them well before they happen. A lot of these more serious side effects are, downstream effects of things that, ideally you can catch before ideally you can catch constipation before it becomes a small bowel obstruction. Now, of course, there's always going to be that one in a million person that just
Right.
has a really bad reaction right out of the gate. But for a lot of times you can stop these things before when they're little problems before they get to be big problems. So I think that's really important. And then, in terms of the muscle mass, there's a lot of research that's going on
Mm,
about it now. Um, but we do have some data that shows that when you lose weight in any capacity, you are going
yes.
to lose a percentage of that is going to be muscle. And so that's regardless of how it's happening, whether it's through diet alone, whether it's through exercise alone. And so I think it's important to think about, well, also, how is that affecting somebody's quality of life? Like,
Yeah.
because sometimes what we see is maybe somebody lost some muscle, but actually like they're stronger and like the
Right.
quality of the muscle is better. Um, and also like if they are losing it and working out, they're not tired, they're not fatigued, they're not feeling the effects of whatever, 10% or 15% muscle loss that they had, and then they're working on building it. And so for me, I've prescribed this medication for people in their 20s. I've prescribed it for people in their 80s. I'm always on the lookout for things like muscle loss, but I think on a in a symptomatic day-to-day level, it's not really something that I've seen in terms of side effects.
Yeah, and as you were talking about that, I feel like the whole gut thing, I feel that if you do experience any type of gut thing, my assumption there was gut stuff going on before. And this just basically exposed it more.
Mhm.
And that way for many people, they might feel like I'm always felt nauseous and I just thought it was just how I was, or like I never went to the bathroom. And now and it just, these kind of thing now when you kind of go on these medications, all of a sudden that is what used to kind of be like what I thought was normal now becomes even more difficult because this medication is trying to regulate you and you've already come from a dysregulated place.
Right. Like somebody who has IBS, and they might feel like it gets worse on these medications.
Mhm.
Sometimes it actually gets better.
Yeah,
Every once in a while I have a patient that, they had more kind of like loose stool before, and then now they kind of like are a little bit more constipated, and so it kind of balances itself out.
yeah.
So that the thing that is always surprising to me is that how unpredictable the response is to these medications. I find that, they're really all over the map. And I can
Mm,
have one patient in the morning who's like, I just lost weight and I have no side effects. And then I have
right.
the next patient is like, very similar type of patient profile, and they are so nauseous on the tiny baby dose. So,
Right. But I also feel like, nowadays there's also those, there's a Facebook group for pretty much anything now. And, I just got my prescription. I took my first shot and I'm like, hey, I lost 4 million pounds.
right.
Meanwhile, there's another person on there who's like, I've been taking it for 6 months and I only lost a half a pound. And it's like, you kind of have this like weight loss Olympics competition of how quickly you can lose the weight where, I think for a lot of people, the repair stuff is happening in the background that again, it's unsexy, right? Like sexy is like I lost 400 pounds in 3 days.
Right, right. And I think also what people a lot of times they don't realize is that like it's going to be exciting for a little bit and then it's going to be boring forever, right? Like
Yeah,
you don't lose weight forever. So you're going to have this downward trajectory, and then your body's going to find its new normal. And so a lot of people get to that point and they're like, it stopped working. And it's like, no, it didn't stop working. It's going to level out at some point.
right.
This is where you are. So it's still working, it's keeping you there, but that's as far as it's going to take you.
I love that. And then as you mentioned about muscle mass, you're 100% right because I feel like there's two factions who take these medications. One who are looking for the magic, right? And they're just going to be like, I'm going to take these pills and magically the weight's going to come off and I don't have to do bupkis. And then you
Hmm.
have the other group who is like, I know that I need to work out, but maybe you just didn't have the motivation or the energy to work out. So now with these medications, you're getting, that energy. When I have energy, I'm probably going to have the motivation to go to the gym. And maybe when I see the scale move a little bit, there's going to be a little bit more motivation. So, maybe I'm not going to the gym and thinking I'm going to be the next, power lifter, but I'm, doing more than I was and
Right,
kind of, just baby stepping it because it's like, do we have to like pack on 20 pounds of muscle? No.
right.
But if we're kind of playing that seesaw game of helping us keep the wins and the losses kind of in yin and the yang, we all win.
Right, right. And especially, and even for that first category of people that, they have no intention of going to the gym, I also think that's really where your check-ins and having somebody that's monitoring you is also very helpful. So you can it can be an ongoing conversation of like, and how are we doing with the strength training? Have you thought
Mm.
more about it? Maybe they're not ready yet, but just keeping that conversation alive so that they're aware that it would be great for them for their overall health to add that in. Maybe they're not ready yet, but at least it hasn't fallen off the table.
So now, how do you, for how does someone work with you? Like are you taking just, do you have to be in the obesity category? Like is there any kind of special case study to be a client of yours or patient, sorry?
Oh, that is such a great question. No, so I really like using for my practice, I like using the term weight medicine
Hmm.
because I think people can be at any BMI, at any size, and have an issue with their weight or have an issue with their eating. And so there's no prerequisite in terms of that. So I certainly work with people in Massachusetts. I can be your doctor and your coach. So I can kind of do all the things,
Mm,
which I really love having all the options available. That's why I made this practice so I could do the medication side effect if people need it. I can do the coaching part of it if they need that. And it's very, very tailored to where somebody's coming from. And then for people, there's so many people, as you know, there are people who maybe they're on a medication, but they're in California
mm,
or the UK or somewhere, and they already have that part figured out, but they really still, the medications don't do everything for people.
yeah.
And so they really need some help with getting to the gym, or they still have a very chaotic relationship with food,
Yeah.
or maybe they're not on a medication and they're thinking like, I really want to do everything I can to not start a medication.
Mm,
So for people outside of Massachusetts, I work with them on all the non-medical aspects as well.
perfect. And so as you talked about that, who would make just not a good candidate for these medications?
Um, Not a good candidate. Anybody who isn't meeting the requirement for the BMI. I think in the future we will probably use these medications a lot more off-label in terms of,
Mm,
alcohol use disorder or medication-related weight gain. Or I think there's so many uses that are going to be coming in the future. But I think in these early stages, somebody who has a BMI of 24 isn't going to be, from my perspective, isn't going to be a great candidate. I always want to make sure that, if people have any sort of history of a clinical eating disorder, that,
yeah.
we're on the right track with that. I think it's not a complete obstacle for people, but it's certainly, you want to make sure that you're helping somebody and not harming them. Um, and I think, I mean, to be honest, there are really, there aren't that many. This is going to help a lot of people.
Right.
I think there are, a couple categories of people that medically aren't going to be a good fit, if they have, one of the laundry list of
Yeah.
contraindications, it's not going to be a great fit for them. But those are, it's a short list of people that I think it's not a good fit for.
And so the other thing I wanted to chat with you is that, nowadays I'm seeing a lot more conversations around just the term peptides in general, right? So I think Ozempic and opened the kind of the door, and now other peptides are kind of working their way through, and there are several peptides that are like, oh, this is for energy, and this is for fat loss, and this is for this, and this is for that. And for those people who are out there probably looking at that, because again, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if it's as regulated as GLPs, or if it's just another kind of off-label use of different things we've had out there for years.
That is such a good point because I think the word peptide, it doesn't really tell us very much at all. And so it can be used in marketing to describe a variety of things. And I've definitely had, patients who are talking about, oh, I think I'm going to try, this peptide from the Meta Spa. But what they're really talking about and what nobody filled them in on was that it's like compounded semaglutide. So it's really like when somebody says peptide,
Mm,
you really want to know like what actually are you talking about? Like
right.
what is this? What's the name of the medication? Like are we talking about, a compounded semaglutide or tirzepatide, which are the generic names for, Wegovy and Zepbound? Or are we talking about another medication? You just want to know
Right.
like
And it's
what you might be taking.
and it's funny because when you look at them, they'll say it's A40, and you're just like, okay, so you is this just to make it seem like, anyone in the medical profession knows that when you're creating a drug, it is not called Ozempic, right? In the lab, it is called some code name for decades before marketing gets involved and says, we're calling it this.
Right. Right. So I think I am always a little bit suspect if people are calling something a peptide because I feel like it's just kind of used to kind of disguise something.
Yes.
And I think what we always want is to be transparent about what we're taking, what the side effects are, where it came from, who's prescribing it, all those
Right.
things.
I'm so leery of all the peptide talk, the supplement talk, because I'm just always like, they have found your fear
Mm,
and have found a way to just kind of like hammer home,
yeah.
why I need to take a fistful of whatever pill it is.
Right. Yes. I think yes, exactly. And of course, like I think the supplements in general, they're so appealing because of course what like I could just take this and potentially get these results. And who doesn't, it's a very quick fix and doesn't everybody love a quick fix, right? So it really does prey upon all those kind of mental shortcuts that we're all so, predisposed to. And it's just one of those things like if it sounds too good to be true,
It
like
is.
it is, I really don't ask people to take a lot.
Yeah.
Calcium and vitamin D, those are important, multivitamin, and then it really depends on, someone else, so their medical history, if they have digestive issues, it can be harder to get things like iron. But for the most part, I think people can save a lot of money
Yes.
not buy the huge vats of, various supplements that we're not quite sure what we do it. And also for supplements, they can't actually market that they treat a condition. They can
Right.
only say that they support health or they promote health.
Right.
But so if you dig into the wordplay that's used, I think it's so interesting because they have to really dance around what they can actually do.
Right. Or if they do say it, there's this little asterisk that's like, can't prove or disprove that this
Right.
may or may not. So it's
Right.
like, so you have to
Exactly.
take whatever you will. And, and with that said, there's a lot of things, a lot of supplements out there that I see that say natural GLP-1. Is there, we know that it is a natural occurrence of in our bodies, but there's not a supplement that is a natural GLP.
No. No, I would just save you. Who knows what's in those? I
Right.
would save your money. Save your money and, have some like a good source of protein.
Yeah. So it's kind of like when Fruit Loop says it's a whole grain.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes. It's like something doesn't quite line up here. That's exactly right.
And so my last question here before we get into our speed round is, one of the things that I've seen people use the semaglutide off label is more for like insulin resistance
Mhm.
and to really help those who struggle with kind of just managing their blood sugar.
Mhm.
Uh, is that, something that you work on in your practice?
Yeah, I think that's always part of it. I think whenever people have an issue with their weight, a part of that can be from blood sugar not being controlled. My favorite way to control blood sugar is with food,
Mm,
because a lot of people think that they are being healthy, and then when we go through kind of what they're eating, there's a lot of hidden sugar.
mm,
And that's one of my biggest pet peeves are these like people just, I think they're trying to do the right thing.
right.
And then they're like eating a granola bar and it's like, well, I thought this was healthy. And it's like, well, actually, a lot of these foods are really, we need to think of them more as dessert and not like a breakfast food.
Yeah.
And I never want to like, I have this whole thing about like yogurt because I think so many terrible things have been done to yogurt. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having yogurt that has sugar in it, but I think we just need to know like that that is being put in there and not and that it's really more of a dessert. And so that might change how you want to have it in your life, right?
Yeah.
So I think finding those can be very helpful for people. But I think I wouldn't for me, I don't usually prescribe it just for that, but if I'm seeing somebody for weight and we decide it's a good fit, it's definitely going to help with that.
Right.
There's no question about it.
Um, it's interesting because it's like, just all the buzzwords that you hear on the socials that you're like, blood sugar, oh my God, cortisol, oh my God. And so like, all of a sudden things that you never one word you never even spoke in your entire life or you all of a sudden now become, the mainstream in your vocabulary and you don't really even know what you're saying when you're using it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there are all these buzzwords.
And you're like, you think you're using them right and you think you're doing the right thing. And like you said, you go out and you like score all these like granola bars and these protein bars, and then you just look at the front and then you don't flip it over and be like, oh, sugar, 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 other crap, other crap, other crap, other crap.
Right, right. Like I thought I was doing the right thing. I'm getting my whole grains. This has protein added, like everything has protein in it, right?
Right.
And so I think that's just the next, marketing wave is like we can put protein in this and then everybody's going to think this is healthy. And it's like, well, I just try to move people away from like science project food, right?
Yeah.
It's like if it has protein powder in it, like does that make it good? Like
Right.
you know, and I think part of it is just, realizing that the deck is stacked against you as a consumer for sure.
Yeah. And I laugh when, you see the like you see the package and the package is like, okay, I now have like 3 grams of protein. And I'm like, seriously, dude? Like
Right. And what else is in there?
right, 3 grams, like come on. Like
Right,
come
right,
back when you have at
exactly.
least 12.
Right, right. Or maybe I'll just eat something. I'll have some edamame and I'll get
Right.
everything that I need from that. So, yeah.
All right. So I do have some rapid fire questions for you. What is the biggest lie social media tells women about, Ozempic, semaglutide, or any of those kind of area products?
Oh gosh, wow, do we have an hour? This is rapid fire, so I will say that they're like casual. I think they're
Mm,
when we talk about them so much, like, oh, just go on this, oh, just go on that.
yeah.
It is an injectable prescription medication, and it is not something, it's not like buying Tylenol, and it shouldn't be like buying Tylenol over the
Right.
counter, right? So it is something that you need to make sure you're a good candidate for. It's something you need to make sure you're monitored for. It's something you need to make sure you're getting the correct version of, that this came from an FDA approved source and not somebody's like basement lab. I don't know.
Right, right.
So the casual attitude, while I think it's nice that a lot of people are able to access and use this, there's a flip side to that where I feel like sometimes we don't give it the proper respect that it needs for our safety.
You're right. It's kind of like back during the day when people had Botox parties. I feel like it's very similar to that. Like, oh, just get the Ozempic, go out and get the Ozempic. Like, go out and get some chicken broth.
Right, right, right. Yes. And it's like, well, if that Botox goes wrong, like that
Right.
eyebrow is not getting lifted up for another
Right.
3 months,
You're like here for a long time.
it's gonna go really wrong.
Yeah. I love that. And we talked about boring basics. So what is like your most underrated lifestyle change that works better than a diet?
Oh my gosh, it is just, knowing when you're hungry and knowing when you're full.
Yes.
Nobody knows that.
Yes.
And it really helps you distinguish between the mind hunger and the stomach hunger.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Like, am I physically hungry? Or
Mm,
is it just like, or is it just like my survival mechanism of like looking out for food that might be appealing, right? Like, there's nothing we're not like bad because we have mind hunger, right? It's there for a reason. It's just not as helpful now when we
Right.
have like convenience stores on every corner and brightly packaged food that will is
Hmm.
very attractive to our like, our prehistoric brain. So,
Yeah, like in America, there are people who are struggling for food. Don't get me wrong, and don't come after me. But the majority of people are not starving. And so many people get in their mind like, "Oh my God, I'm starving." And you're like, "Are you really?"
right. Like, or am I bored?
Right.
Am I tired? Am I thirsty? Did I just eat something that didn't have any, it was very processed and just like my body, it's kind of like processed foods I like to think of as like newspaper on a fire, right?
Yeah.
It's gone. Like you put it in
Hmm.
there, it's gone, and yet you've consumed these calories, right? So, yeah, knowing when you're full and when you're hungry.
And what's one mistake you see people make when they start to take these medications?
I think people sometimes make the mistake of thinking the medication is going to do everything for them.
Yep.
And just like I can outsource everything this medication, I don't need to do anything else. And that is certainly a choice for people. Um, is it going to give them the best results? No. And a lot of times the medication kind of forces people to change because
Yeah.
they can't tolerate food in the same way. But there are some people that, it doesn't really affect them like that. And sometimes it's just a matter of time of people like getting used to it and kind of coming around to the fact like, I probably might be nice to like start walking again. But I think this idea of like, well, I can just continue, if I wasn't eating healthy, I can continue eating in that way. I hate to see that because I know it can work so much better for people. It's hard to get these medications. They're expensive. Like, let's get your money's worth, right? So.
And speaking of expense, this is totally like you took me down this road. Do you think there'll ever come a time, in I'd say in the next 10 years that these medications won't be, thousands of dollars for people who choose to pay out of pocket?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's already moving in that direction. I think the market forces are strong, and already, the Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, whom I have no financial interest in, but they are selling these medications directly to patients if
Mm,
they have a prescription, and it's already half the cost of what it was. So you can get them for $500 a month now, as opposed to 1,000, 1,200. There's so much that's coming out in the near future or that's being researched. And I think every pharmaceutical company on the planet is trying to make their own version of something that
mm.
works better and lasts longer and that you can take, once a month or once every couple months. So I think there's so much research in this area that it will be much more accessible for people in the future, but we're just not quite there yet.
Yeah. But I also think like for most of us, we're now learning kind of like the whole drug pipeline scenario of
Mm.
like, how much it costs to put into these drugs and then kind of like anything you're like I put in $1 zillion and I'm at least trying to get back the zillion before we can start talking about reductions in pricing.
Right, right. Or just like how drugs are priced in different countries. I think we all learned
Oh,
a lot about that, right?
oh my
Like,
God, that is like, and it's interesting because you look at it and you're just like, okay, but like it's the same thing. Like it just show me the difference. Like we were able to show the market difference between Australia, the US, and Brazil, we'd be like, oh, I get it. I feel
yeah,
it. But we
right.
we don't see it.
Oh, I mean, it's just, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of things that we weren't anticipating learning so much about that we now know in much greater detail.
And what's one thing every lady over 40 needs to unlearn about weight loss?
I think it is so important to think about why you want to lose weight.
Mm,
Because I think, and I love your podcast for kind of undoing this diet culture for people, but I think that is just, so it's like we do, feel like we do so many things to our bodies when really we want to
Yes.
move towards like this is for you
Yeah, yeah.
and like you're not broken and there's nothing like yeah, your body's changing, but there's nothing wrong with you. Like we don't tell children going through puberty that there's something wrong with them, right? We don't tell like moody teenagers that like oh my gosh, like you need to be like heavily medicated, right? It's like, no,
Right.
we allow that. We know that's a natural part of life. That's maybe not everybody's favorite time in their life, but we really there's a narrative of like this is gonna be a little rocky, but we're all gonna get through it.
Right.
And I think we, either we don't talk about, kind of reverse puberty, which is like what I like to think of as
Yeah.
menopause. We don't talk either we don't talk about it or we sometimes talk about it like there's something like you need to fix something or there's something wrong with you when it's like this is another phase that can be very uncomfortable for women and how can we support that, but also not pathologize it?
It's funny that you say that because you're right. But I also, I feel like it is reverse puberty, but I also feel that puberty is talked about so much more. You know,
Oh, yes.
everyone can say moody teenager. Everyone's like, yep, feel you. I got
Right.
one at home.
Right.
Yet, no one pulled us aside and said, menopause is the reverse puberty. You're going to feel like a crazy person. You're going to hate everyone around you some days, and you're going to love everyone around you some days. No one pulled us aside. And I think that's the biggest shock for most of us is that, like, dude, you guys knew this was happening?
Forever. This has been
Right.
happening literally forever.
And
And
no one was like, let me clue you in.
like FYI, right, there's
Yes.
no kind of stepwise like we have in puberty. Like it's like, well, first this happens, then this happens, and this happens, and you're gonna feel terrible, but it's all totally normal and you're gonna get through it. There's none of that. I absolutely
No.
agree.
Or like, I saw a meme on social media. It's like, Judy Bloom prepared us for like getting your period, right? And it's like, Judy Bloom, like you let us down. Like you just disappeared. Like we got our periods and you're like, go off into the world.
Right.
And you need to
Right.
like, are you there? Like, hey, I'm back, God. It's Margaret again. I'm now 50.
Right. I feel terrible, right?
Right.
I also think like, everybody comes in and they're like, I need something to like take the edge off. And I just think like, why don't we just keep the edge on?
Yes.
Like, because I think the edge is very helpful and maybe the problem is not you. Maybe there's a reason why you're kind of ticked off all the time. Maybe it has nothing to do with you at all.
And
So,
when I tell my women that, I'm like, well, I'm like, we don't have progesterone anymore. And I'm like, guess what? I'm like, your family's always been annoying. You just were able to tolerate it more.
yeah.
Now your toleration went from 10 to 0. And you just have to tell your family that. You're like, some days you are just going to be work my last nerve. You're going to
Yeah.
be dancing on the bleeding edge of my nerves.
Right, right. And it's like like maybe you don't have to like smile and nod for the next, decade of your life. Maybe there's a reason why it's a lot harder, and maybe that's fine.
Yeah. And it's totally fine if that person worked your last nerve. You just
Right.
smile and you're like, I'm going to have to need to leave the room right now
Right.
because feelings will get hurt.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree.
So where can my listeners, she has a great YouTube and talks all about the things when it comes to weight loss. Where can they find you?
Oh, thank you so much. Well, if you want to work with me directly, my website is www.weightmediциnemd.com. And also, I have a YouTube channel called Weight Medicine with Dr. Megan, and it goes into all kinds of detail about medications, weight loss. You can ask me questions. I do a weekly office hours video answering viewer questions. So, yeah, any of those places.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I have two things we're gonna close this episode with. If you had to finish this sentence, weight loss isn't about willpower, it's about
Health.
yes, 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 yes. So good. Yes, it is absolutely about your freaking health.
Yeah. Yeah. I
N-
mean, because sometimes it's like, I always like to think like if you didn't know what the number on the scale was, what would you be okay with? Like, how do you feel about your body?
We just fell in love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's true. Like no one walks around and says, Dr. Megan, how much you weigh in? Like no one has ever approached me on the street and said, Kim, how much do you weigh? No one has ever done that.
Right. Like, what size are your jeans now, and what size were they last year?
No
Like,
one ever approached me on the street and said that. And, the one thing I always try to get through my clients, and I'm sure you do too, is that like break up with the scale because the scale, like if it makes or break your day, it's not for you.
no, no. I mean, I think there's times like if we need to show insurance companies that a medication is working, it's helpful. There are circumstances, but for day-to-day life, it's like
No.
if we didn't have that information, if you didn't have this number, like what do you like? Let's just detach from that for a minute. And like, how do you feel about your body and your
Yes.
health?
That's always my number one. I'm like, great, I don't care what the scale like, but how's your energy? How's your hunger? How's your cravings? Let's talk about the untangibles because you can't really put that on a scale somewhere.
Right. Are you just like thinking about your next meal all the time? Like that's a certain kind of hell, right? Like
Yes. And you just
that's
count.
not fun.
No, you're counting the days. You're like, when am I eating this? When am I eating? When am I eating? That
Right.
sucks.
That's awful. Nobody
Oh,
wants.
I absolutely love that. And I do ask the last question I ask everyone who comes on my podcast, what is one thing that makes you feel magical?
Um, my maybe this is strange, but like my personal autonomy makes me feel
Yes.
magical. Like I feel like I like things like stress or rushing or all like that's created by the brain.
Mm,
And I have the choice about like how I want to engage with that. Like I can choose to have a lot of things going on, but not feel stressed about it. I can choose
yes.
to have a busy schedule and not rush my lunch. Like I have so much more control over my experience in my life than, and everybody does, than I think we give ourselves credit for. And every time I hear somebody say like, well, I have to do this or I should do that. Those are always like red flag words for me because like
Yeah.
as a coach, I mean, you know this, like you don't have to do anything,
Nope.
really,
Not
not
at
a
all.
darn thing. So that's what makes me feel magical.
I love that. And it's funny, like I've asked this for over 300 episodes and I've never heard a duplicate.
Oh, that's funny. I like that.
Everyone has like something and they're all just like, yeah, that's a good one. Like I can't say like, here are the top five. Like they're all like, oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. But yeah,
Mhm.
you're right. The self-autonomy, especially as women, because so many of us put ourselves in the back seat.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
like you said, oh, I should be doing this or I should be doing that, or oh, beat myself up because I didn't do. But I love that you're like, I can choose that like path, that
Yeah.
pace.
And I can choose like how I think about myself. Like I choose how if I tell myself I'm doing a great job, right? I can choose that. I can choose to tell myself that instead of telling myself all the things that I like should be doing.
Yeah. Oh, so good. I love it. I love it. Dr. Megan, thank you so much for this. Like as always, I never know how these shows are going to go. I write down some questions, and next thing you know, I have a bunch of different questions on my piece of paper based on our conversation. And this has been fabulous. So, guys, if you know someone who's thinking about these medications, absolutely look up Dr. Megan. She can talk to you regardless of where you are on this planet. But also just hop on her YouTube. Like she really just shares the poop about all of these medications, what to do with them, how to use them, all the random things that might pop up for you. Like she is definitely a wealth of information. And if any ahas came up for you, screenshot this and be sure to share us on the socials. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Great. All right, Magic Makers, I will talk to you guys next week. And you guys always know where you can find me. My socials are always open for you for anything you might have to ask me.